Good evening. This is Loreena Hagenbart, and tonight I am going to be interviewing our executive director, Shelby Knight, and one of our parent mentors from the Delta region, Michele. And I am a parent mentor for the North Central part of Arkansas, as well as the Northwest River Valley area. So they know I love to travel, so I get all of those counties in the beautiful part of Arkansas. But anyway, before we get started, April is the month of the military child, as well as Autism Awareness Month. And so I just want to do a kudos out to all the school districts that went over and above to recognize the students who are attached to the military communities. And I know one school gave a military student a $4,000 scholarship.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Wow.
And so that's way over and above from, they said they did that through the sales of their t-shirts. So that was an exciting thing. And I think Fort Smith had 29 Purple Star banners were awarded, and over 200 people participated in the big major event. So I just saying a kudos to all of our school districts and schools that gave that attention to our students that are connected to the military. And now we're switching. Today I'm wearing blue for autism. And so Arkansas has had numerous activities with our autism awareness, but I would like to introduce to you right now Shelby Knight, Executive Director. As I said, her son is older, and Shelby's gone through lots of hoops and great victories and some challenges. And so I'm going to ask Shelby the first question. Shelby, how young tell me about Jeremiah. That's what I should say. Tell me a little bit about Jeremiah. He's so wonderful.
He's 32 today. He's 32 and he still lives at home with us. He was diagnosed with autism before he was 3, just a little bit, about a week before his 3rd birthday. And he was diagnosed like everybody else was back in the 90s at Dennis Developmental Center in Little Rock.
Okay. And Michele, how old was Buddy and how old is he now?
Buddy is 11 years old, and he was diagnosed when he was almost 5 years old. At the time we were in Louisiana, and so he was diagnosed at Children's Hospital of New Orleans, similar to the Children's Hospital in Little Rock.
Okay. So Shelby, when Jeremiah was given that diagnosis, what emotions or how did it affect you, and how did it affect your hubby, and how did it affect his siblings?
Well, that's interesting. It was for me a harrowing experience, of course, because we took our child there who was beautiful and perfect, and we had some concerns, and then we left with a kiddo who was absolutely autistic. And I was kind of on the fence about it going in, but after we sat in front of our panel of experts and they went one by one and explained all of his deficits to me, and then the last person in the list on the line got to give me the news that he is definitely autistic. So it was devastating to me. I remember well that they gave me a great big stack of paperwork to look over, and if I had any questions to call them. Of course, I called them the very next morning, but with my questions. But I remember it being very, very different for me because I was in mourning, because they said, you'll be in mourning. And they said, consider this as the death of a dream that you had. The child that you brought today is different from the child you're going to leave with. And so they were really right about that. And what was so strange about it, I thought, was that when we came home, of course, I was a stay-at-home parent at the time, but when we came home, I was a mess. I was just a terrible mess. But my husband went to work the next day, and the next day was a Friday. And I thought we would stay home and mourn together, but he went to work, which is typical for a dad. That's how they handle things like this. They just keep on. They just keep moving, and they don't slow down long enough to be in mourning over something. They just don't. It's not in them to do it that way. Most of the dads I've come in contact with anyway. As far as siblings, I don't know. The reaction. I don't know what their reaction was. in the beginning, but my siblings were always very accepting, very, very kind. Always. My inner circle, my parents were always very kind. But Ben's family did not live close to us at that time, so I can't speak for them.
And how about now? Did you have any other children when Jeremiah was?
Oh yes, he's our middle child. I have
Okay.
a 31-year-old daughter, and then we have a 34-year-old daughter. So ours are all very close together. And yes, I did have two others, and that's how I knew that something was wrong with Jeremiah, simply because we had had this baby when he was 5 months old. We found out we were pregnant, and so I had this baby come along beside him and meet all the milestones that he was not meeting. And so I would take him and the new baby to the pediatrician and say, "Look at her, look what she can do. He cannot do those things." And they would say, "Oh, you have postpartum. You need to calm down. Calm down. It'll happen. Just give them time. Boys are slower than girls to develop. Give them time." So, yeah.
Okay. And Michele, when you and your hubby received the diagnosis, how was that moment?
Well, if you see, for us, it was really different because we had been trying to figure out. I had noticed something very early on in his development. When he was a baby, he was just born different. And I
Mm-hmm.
also had an older child like Miss Shelby, and so she had met all her milestones and was an easygoing baby, was like the perfect baby, sleeping through the night at 4 weeks old. I mean, so when he came, he was loud, he cried a lot, he had a lot of issues with formula. We had to switch him constantly. He had to be held at all times. You couldn't even, I remember sitting at the table eating. I mean, to the point where you had to go to the bathroom and hold him. I mean, he was very, we didn't know what was going on. And he had started some of his milestones, but then he regressed. And so that's when we were like, something's not quite right. And everybody kept assuring us it's fine, just like Miss Shelby said, he's a boy, he's going to be
Mhm.
slower later, all kids develop differently. And so everybody kept making me feel like I was overreacting. And so when I went to the pediatrician, I was so upset because I was like, I don't know what's wrong. We had an amazing pediatrician. We were very lucky then and now, in Louisiana and Arkansas, that we've had great pediatricians, and he was very proactive. So when I went in there at 9 months old and said he was beginning to make noises, and he was trying to talk, and now he's silent, he won't make eye contact, he doesn't point to anything. And the doctor, he prepared me. He said, he said, we're going to wait a few more months. He said, but I want to prepare you for that. I think I'm seeing signs of autism. And so I was shocked, because autism was very different to me. It had been explained very differently. I had a different perspective on what it was. And I just kept saying that he can't be autistic.
Mhm.
There's got to be another explanation. And so when we came back at 12 months, nothing was better. So he said, yeah, we're going to go ahead and send a referral in for early intervention, and we're going to get you on the list to get an evaluation. But he said, I want you to be prepared that I think your son is autistic. And so I threw myself into reading stuff because I couldn't wrap my head around that he was autistic. And so our journey took us until he was almost 5 years old because the waiting lists were so long. And so we were getting early intervention services, and people were trying to, uh, you know, I wasn't even in mourning. I wanted an answer, but people kept trying to assure me, oh, he's probably not autistic. He'll grow out of it. It's probably just this and this. And we did tubes in his ears, and we did speech, and we did OT, and we just pursued everything that we were told to do. And everybody kept assuring me that he wasn't going to be autistic. So I couldn't really mourn or accept or anything because I had so many different opinions coming at me
Mhm.
from friends,
Yeah.
family, and therapists telling me what they thought it was and that it wasn't autism. Um, and so then we went to children's, and I'd started reading more and more about it, and I became convinced. My husband wasn't convinced, but I was convinced he's autistic. I really think he is, that my perception of autism was wrong, and that I think he is. And so when we went to children. So when he was almost 5 years old and they said he's autistic, it was, it was almost vindicating because I was able to go back and tell everybody he is autistic. I'm not crazy. And it made me finally feel like, okay, well, now we have the diagnosis. Now we can move forward with, going down the right path. And so I don't think I got a chance to mourn. It would have been nice to have a chance to take in all the information and mourn and feel, just feel those emotions, but no one would let me. They wouldn't let me mourn because they were convinced there was no way he was autistic. So when we finally got the diagnosis, it was almost like, all right, now we got to do all these other services and we got to do all these different things. I think maybe eventually I mourned somewhere. But it was like I wasn't allowed to because no one believed that he was or wouldn't let me believe that he was. So I didn't get the chance to feel my emotions. And I think people should get a chance to feel those emotions and mourn that their child is going to have a different life than what they planned. And I didn't even get, I don't know when I finally got the opportunity to do that. But yeah, it was, I wish things had been different and I wish I'd had more support and more people to help me through it. Instead of a lot of people, that didn't understand it and were in denial, more in denial than I was. And it was my child. Once they gave me the diagnosis, I just immediately accepted it because I had heard for so long that there was no way that he was. So,
well, one of the unique qualities of motherhood is sometimes we do have those moments to breathe and sometimes we don't. I don't know how Shelby did it holding a baby and with Jeremiah so close together. And so for you, you did your research that I think you probably did some healing as you were getting that research because you weren't thinking, you were thinking, people must think I'm crazy. I'm an overbearing mother. I'm, whatever. But yet through your research, you found an avenue of support via the printed documents. Shelby, as and we're going to go through IDEA, the Individual Disability Education Act, child fine. During this time of diagnosis, Jeremiah would have been part of that child fine part A, right? I think I never get those through. But anyway, so during this time, did you find an avenue of support to work as he, toward education?
We did. And I wish I could remember how they came about, but we did have early intervening services come to our home. And it was so very important to me because I did not have the answers. Really the World Wide Web was not a thing when Jeremiah was diagnosed with autism. There was one book in the public library here in Jonesboro, and it unfortunately was Leo Kanner's book on refrigerator mothers. And so the only thing I had to go by was the fact that Jeremiah's autism came directly from me being a cold mother. And it kind of, it verified the fact that I did have a baby really quickly after he was born. I was consumed with a newborn when he needed my care. And so it just kind of concreted that whole idea for me for a little bit. I've changed my mind through the years, of course, but I don't believe in those things. Now, but it was, someone did come to our home and I remember her first name, and she was wonderful because she came in and just kind of validated what we were doing as a family. And she played with the girls along with Jeremiah and worked with us as a family. And it was just so refreshing. I would get a lump in my throat when she would leave because I didn't have any friends outside the home. I couldn't have any friends outside the home because Jeremiah was allergic to all the strangers outside of our little house. So I couldn't go anywhere with him. He was too unpredictable. So we were at home, and it was wonderful when she would come in her couple of days a week and work with him and work with us as a family. It was just wonderful. And then he moved on from there to the Learning Center here in Jonesboro when he was 18 months old. And I remember lots of days driving my little minivan there with my girls and taking Jeremiah inside. And it was horrific. It was just it was a horrible experience taking my baby someplace, and I wanted for him to be with me. But I knew he had to be there because they said so. But I wanted him to be with me, and I wanted to help him, but I didn't have the skill set to do it. It was devastating to me. I can still remember, I can still hear him cry as I'm leaving him there with strangers. It was terrible, but it turns out the Learning Center was our saving grace.
And Michele, how about you? Did you get early intervention? Of course, he was 5 when he was diagnosed, but prior to that, were you getting any support?
Yeah, they had something called Early Steps in Louisiana, and so they started in-home therapy also, even without the diagnosis, because he had speech delays and sensory issues.
Okay.
So he qualified under developmental delay at first while we were waiting for a diagnosis. And so I felt the same way Miss Shelby did when they would come in the house, as I finally felt like somebody understood and that they were seeing us and they were seeing what we were going through and they were validating what was happening, where a lot of people outside of our household were still in denial that he was autistic. And so they helped me feel better that I'm not crazy and that they are seeing the things that I'm seeing. And so those services really helped me kind of get a jump start, and they gave me a lot of resources. And I kind of felt the same way Miss Shelby did, where as soon as they gave you a diagnosis, they threw me a bunch of papers. Luckily, the internet was there. There were more books on autism, but you were kind of left to your own devices. It was like, all right, well, here you go, and do all this on your own with no help, no support, no parent mentors, nothing to walk you through this. So the therapists were the ones that were walking me through this. And so we did a lot of stuff in home. Daycare was really difficult. They didn't have the learning centers they have now. And Arkansas has more of these early developmental learning centers than what they had in Louisiana. And so we did daycare, and daycare was difficult because they weren't equipped and they weren't trained. And so we bounced from daycare to daycare. We found a good daycare and we stuck with it for a while. Early Head Start and things like that, they were all full. So, we just were kind of stuck until he was school aged. But we were very grateful for those early intervention services, because that got us through, if without that, we would have had nothing.
Yeah.
So Shelby, was Jeremiah, because the comment is, when you've seen one child with autism, you've seen one child with autism. It's kind of like CP, children with cerebral palsy. What the doctor described for Isaiah was, it's under a big umbrella, and it covers from all the way to the right to the left, to the right, and everything in between. Was Jeremiah verbal? Was he able to walk? What were some of his deficits early on that the Learning Center helped you and helped Jeremiah as well as your family? Excuse me.
Jeremiah was verbal when he was very young. He was verbal, and he could say several words, and then he stopped talking around 15 months or so. And but his time at the Learning Center, it was very helpful to us in his development. Now, Jeremiah was he did not walk on schedule, but he certainly, once he figured it out, he was running. By the time he figured out how to walk, he could run. I wish I was that mom who kept those baby books and knew those things. But let's go back to the part where I said I had 3 children in 3 years. Let's go back to that part a minute.
Super.
That's why there are no dates, exact dates. Any of this stuff is just all memory, and my memory's 57 years old. So when he did learn to walk, he was fine with that. He was not potty trained. I could not train the boy. We were almost ready for public school before he got potty trained. It was devastating to me, but he just was not interested in it. I just was not interested. And that was all that was left for us to do, was to get that done. I was concerned that because he was so limited verbally, he would get me by the hand and take me to the refrigerator, put my hand over his hand on the door, and we did that part, and then I'd try and make him say refrigerator or open, and he would not do either one of those things. He would just get frustrated at me for not just doing it. I've got your hand here, just do what I'm asking you to do. But he would put his hand over my hand, refrigerator door, then his hand over my hand, Sunny Delight or milk or whatever he wanted out of the refrigerator. That's how we did it. He would not speak the words. Same with every other thing we did, toys, shoes, clothes, car, outside, whatever, and doorknobs, whatever he wanted. That's how he communicated it to me.
Now, did he do that as well with your husband and his siblings? Or was
Yes,
it
he
more
did.
just, okay,
No, it was all of us. That's how he communicated with all of us.
good. And Michele, how about you?
But he kind of did the same thing where at first we thought he was going to talk and he regressed, and then he didn't speak until after he was 5 years old. We didn't think we were concerned because we had heard so many parents and speech therapists, and there was a lot of concern that there were many kids who are autistic who don't speak.
Mhm.
And so they started we started using the speech therapist at school. When he did finally go for early intervention services at public school, they introduced PECs, and that
Yes. Yes.
was a huge I mean, it just, we kept using it and using it, and it opened up that communication for him, and we kept on it, and everybody used it. And I remember printing these things off the computer and laminating them, and he had just a whole huge binder full of these things. And then
Yes.
suddenly something clicked and words started coming out. And
Yep.
so it was, I mean, it was a huge deal because we thought it was just never going to happen, and we were accepting that he may always be nonverbal. And so then it words started just would come out, just random words, and then it's taken many years for him to put together sentences now. But we got there eventually. But I would say PECS was what got us there. If we wouldn't have done some type of assistive technology or PECS or some type of program, I don't know if we would have gotten there.
Right.
Okay. When you took, Shelby, when you went out in public as a family, or just you and Jeremiah, and there's always some kind of incident that might occur. Because I had an acquaintance who says they just need a belt, they just need,
Sure.
Those kind of things.
Sure.
And so old school. So anyway, we'll get back to school, but I want to think early on how Jeremiah was in the public square.
Yes. Yes. What was beautiful in most people's eyes, and I don't mean to brag, ladies, but I had a beautiful child. I mean, I haven't had an ugly child yet, and I'm done with that. But all my crows are very, very black. They're all that's what the mama crow says, right? All her crows are the blackest. Well, mine are. And when Jeremiah was little, he was beautiful. He had white hair, and he had eyelashes, really, really long eyelashes. He's great big blue eyes. So I would set him in the shopping cart, and we would do our best. And I'd leave the girls home with Ben because I could just do the one thing. And so I'd leave the girls home, put him in the shopping cart, and off we would go. And he was unhappy that he had to be there in that cart, number one. But people would compliment him on how pretty he was. And of course, it's hard to compliment something that beautiful without touching it. And people would want to reach down and touch his cheek. And yes, and it was horrific. So that was a terrible experience for everybody, for everybody, the stranger, for me, for the boy. We were all stressing about that. So I just learned I didn't take him out as much simply because of that. It was just too much for him. It was not an enjoyable trip. That took me a long time to reconcile that in my mind, that I feel like I need to expose him to Walmart. I need to expose him to Hobby Lobby. I really don't. Now he goes in those places by himself now. So I just needed to be patient and wait. But I felt like I needed to do it to be a good mom. I've got to take him in here, and I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And Michele, I know Buddy's he's young, but how was it? You're taking Buddy places.
It was rough. He has a tendency he gets overwhelmed in public also. And so public places were also very difficult. And so we would have incidents of having to pack him out of somewhere. kicking and screaming or run after him. And so we had to learn too that he didn't have to go everywhere and experience everything, and that it was okay to leave early, or to, if we were going to someone's house or going somewhere, to say, hey, this is what we may have to do while we're there for him to be comfortable, or we may have to leave when things start getting upsetting. And so we started pre-planning everything. We had to pre-plan every trip, every escape route, every potential situation that could happen, because I used to be very, very insecure about the dirty looks and the whispers and the comments, and people did, of course, because some people, they're just like that,
Sure.
would make the little snide remarks, and it would really hurt. And so for a while, I also, I got to the point where I started avoiding it. But then I got to the point where, if we went through all the planning to make this happen, and it was something that he really wanted to do, or we knew he would really enjoy, we just ignored those comments and we focused on him and our family enjoying something together, and we didn't care about those comments anymore. But that took a long time to get to that point. But there's still some things that we just don't do.
Sure.
There's, we don't make
It's
it a
not
point to
worth
go
it.
to everything. It isn't.
Yeah,
It has
it's
to
not
be
worth it.
something we're going to enjoy, or that's going to
Yes.
make some really great memories,
Yes.
because then it's worth it. It's worth those great pictures. It's worth those smiles. It's worth
Yes.
all that joy. But if it's not going to bring joy, we're count us out, because we're not doing it.
Right. I completely agree.
Yeah, those are great responses. Now let's get to school. So Shelby, as he started school and middle school and high school, how heavily did you have to advocate and teach and assist and and give input and bring in supports? How was that for you?
It was horrific. From the very first day of kindergarten, it was a horrible experience for all of us. And simply put, we had such a wonderful early intervention experience where they took care of the whole family that I assumed that that's what public school was going to be like. I felt like we were going to be cared for and nurtured and managed when we got to public school. I thought that there would be more attention paid to my little guy than there was. And so in the first, we practiced. I took Jeremiah to school the weeks before school began, took him to the kindergarten classroom so he could see where he was going to be, took him to the cafeteria for about a week or two before school began, and we had lunch in there every day, he and I together. We practiced, we got ready for it. And then they felt like he was ready. And all you've got to do, Mom, is pull up at the curb and he'll go in. So I did that. I pulled up at the curb and I let him out. He held his sister's hand. She was in the 2nd grade. And he held her hand and walked in the building. Then once they got in the building, she let go of his hand and she walked down to the 2nd grade hallway. And he stood there in the middle of that rotunda and didn't know where to go. And I didn't know that he didn't know where to go. I assumed that they had him because they had him in early intervention. But they did not have him in public school. So he wandered the halls and no one was missing a child. He wandered the halls and it was not a good experience. And Jeremiah was not included in things in elementary school. I do remember one conversation with his 3rd grade teacher. I was determined. I knew enough about the law to be dangerous. I mean, I was not advocating professionally at that time. I didn't start that until Jeremiah was in almost junior high in 2001 when I became an advocate. But I knew enough to be dangerous. I attended a couple of conferences and I thought I had a blue book and I knew what I was doing. So I thought I'd make them all nervous. They were not nervous about me, not nervous. They didn't know what to do with me because I didn't know how to enunciate what I wanted from them. I did not know how to advocate for my child when he was young. But that came later. It was terrible. I remember 3rd grade conference. All I wanted from those people from kindergarten to 3rd grade, put him in that classroom. I want him to be with his peers. I don't care if he learns how to hold a pencil. I want him in the general education classroom because that's his right. And that's all I would say to him. And so they put him in there. And then when I went to third grade parent teacher conference, we sat down to talk about his progress. And she said, oh, he's ideal. He is the best student I have. He doesn't bother anyone. We brought in a little toy box for him. When he comes into our class, he sits in the corner and plays in his toy box, and he does not bother anyone. So I went home and sat in a chair catatonic for about 3 days. And then I decided then that we had to make changes. So then we started working heavily with the self-contained program. He was going down there some in his daytime, of course, but we started working heavily with them. Jeremiah entered self-contained in the 3rd grade, and he never came out. He was there until he graduated high school. It's looking back on it, I wish it had been different, but for him personally, it's what he needed because he could not be around all those kids. He just couldn't do it and function. It was a terrible experience for him. He could not function. Academically, he couldn't function emotionally in the large group of students. It was terrible.
Michele, we'll get back to high school for transition here in a minute. Michele, how about you? Because I know Buddy is he transitioning to middle school soon? Or is he in middle school?
He's in middle school now.
Okay. So how did he do when he started school? How did you and others?
He started at a 3-year-old program in public school, and it was very difficult. It was very challenging. It was actually an inclusive environment where there was 10 typical peers and 5 kids with disabilities. And I think his teacher really tried very hard she was the one that also started helping me to learn how to advocate. It was his teacher, which isn't always the way things happen. And she tried really hard to get the support and to help me ask for the support that he needed. And the school system fought us at every turn. And he could have stayed in that inclusive environment. The teacher went and sought out training and went and sought out things to help him. And we tried to ask the school system for that. And they not only gave me a hard time about it, they gave his teacher a hard time about it. And so it ended up that I didn't know what to do. And that's when they sent him to self-contained, because they put it to me as this is the only option that we have. And we don't have a self-contained class here. So we're going to send him into another school that's out of his district. So he didn't get to stay at school with his sister. He had to go somewhere else, and I didn't know that I could have fought for him to be there and for them to help him there. So while we were in Louisiana, I mean, we had some shining moments and not very shining moments, and then we moved to Arkansas, and we had again some really shining moments where he just had, teachers that fought for him and worked hard for him, and then some not so shiny moments where we've struggled to get the support he needs. And it just really has depended on the teacher. It's depended on the school district, how proactive they are and how much they listen and include you. But it's been, school has been the biggest stressor, on top of trying to meet his needs, be his mom, meet his medical needs. School, I would say, is the #1 stress in our life, above his diagnosis, above trying to pursue the medical support and therapy support. School is the #1 thing that keeps me up at night and makes me cry the most. And that's really sad, because I just wish things were better in that department, because I would say I've cried more about issues with school than anything else that we've experienced in our journey.
Now, Shelby, statistics, you know more than I do on autism, and I'm sure Michele does too. When you started, what was the ratio
Oh my
of
goodness.
children with autism compared to now?
I believe back then it was 1 in 10,000 when Jeremiah was diagnosed in 1992. I think it was 1992 when he was diagnosed. Look at our numbers now. Yes. I do want to add to my comment, Michele, before you ask Michele what today's numbers are. But I do want to say that that there was a self-contained teacher in elementary school. And every time I see her out now, I just hug her neck because she's the reason that Jeremiah is a voracious reader. She's the reason that he can count. She's the reason that he has the skill sets that he has for communication, his love of books. He's able to tell time. He's able to do those things because of her interaction with him in elementary school. And Jeremiah had a very faithful junior high teacher and a very faithful high school teacher. But the groundwork was laid by our Miss Kathy way back in the early days at Valley View. Name dropping. I'm name dropping.
Well, that's okay. I think we can do that.
Yeah, I love her.
So,
she's awesome.
Like I said, Michele, do you know what the ratio is today? Or
I don't know what it
Shelby?
is today, but what it was, I think when Buddy was diagnosed was one in, I think it was one in, it was a little bit less than 100. I know it was like one in, I can't remember if it was 75.
Okay.
So that's why my eyes got really big when Miss Shelby said that, because when he was diagnosed, it had dropped below 1 in 100. Now I think recently, I mean, the last time I saw it, which may have been a few years ago, it was like 1 in 55. So it's dropped even lower since then. But yeah, it still was, you know, even in his school, you know, we were at a very rural school. There was only a couple kids there. So it still felt very like it didn't happen as much, but it was actually, like I said, 1 in 75.
Yeah.
So I think there just was a lot of kids that weren't, you know, in our particular area, they weren't being diagnosed, they were being missed. And so I was always made to feel like he was like the only one there. And I was like, that can't be right, because it's 1 in 75 or 1 in whatever. There's got to be more kids here that have it. I just think they were getting missed.
Right.
Well,
I think so too.
and of course the testing and everything has improved. And of course there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And then you've got the what's Rain Man savants, right? So they're no longer
Savantism.
they're no longer part. I mean, they're separate. So, you know, you see all of this convergence of things in education. So Shelby, transition, preparing for high school, for preparing for life. How was that?
Well, there were actual transition meetings held. I do remember that. We did hold transition meetings. They did put Jeremiah through the transition to life test that they do. It used to be called the Cooter exam way back in his day. It's deciding what kind of vocation you might like based on what answers you give on the exam. And so according to his answers, he would like to work in horticulture, which is nothing further from the truth, because he's going to have to get his hands dirty if he does horticulture. He's not going to like that. Basically, what he did was he answered the questions according to what he was doing at the moment. And at the moment, he was taking a little jaunt over into the agriculture building, and they were letting him water the tomato plants. And so he answered that exam based on what he was doing at that time. And that's why I come up with, you should be in horticulture. No, he shouldn't, because he's not going to get dirt under his fingernails. And I knew that. But the transition really was, Jeremiah was determined that he was going to graduate high school with his class. We did not stay a day over what was allowed, because, I mean, he could have stayed till he was 21. He was not going to do that. I was not going to ask him to, because we were done with school. And so he graduated with his peers. And he was proud of it. He wanted to do that. As far as transitioning out to what, Jeremiah's level of autism would only allow us to transition home with me or to a day program. There wasn't anything else. There still isn't anything else. There is limited supported employment. There's not enough of it. There's not enough businesses in this area of the state who are brave enough to take on a person with a disability and just try it and see if they can work. There's not enough of them. So the transition process is I'm not going to say a joke, because I'm a professional in the field. That would be wrong, but I'm going to say that it's lacking.
I think it's a challenge, because you've got to be all things to all men.
Yes.
And, my
Yes.
son, Isaiah can't walk, talk, or feed himself. He needs help. He needs the nurse support. So if I demand as a parent, I want my son to go to Walmart and work there as a greeter.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Who's going to
Right.
stand there beside Isaiah? Who's going to,
Right.
And so the thing is it's really difficult for businesses, to come up with a business model.
Yes. Yes.
And
It
I think
is.
that's one of the, I always get the Arkansas Rehab Services,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
job shadowing and all that.
Yes.
It's fine tuning,
Yes.
talking to these businesses to see how many are willing
Mhm.
and do, because I know we have several at Walmart who
Right.
do carts, and I
Right.
know one in particular has autism.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and so he loves it. He says, I do a really good job. And I said, yes, you do. So every time I say,
Yeah.
you're doing a super job. So,
Yeah.
so Michele, I know, of course, Buddy's had transitioned to middle school. And so I want you to kind of like, in a kind way, if you know what I mean, some of the challenges that you've had, any victories that you've had, the supports that you have, can you share any of that?
It's been rough. In middle school and junior high, I know are going to be rough because of puberty. So we're
Yes.
starting to experience a little bit of that. And that's, we're just at the tip of the iceberg of it. And we know that's going to be rough. But he has, because due to his disability, he has a lot of challenging behaviors that are caused by his, his difficulty communicating and sensory issues and being overwhelmed and not understanding things. He has, an intellectual disability. And so it makes, there's a lot of things that are challenging, but there's a lot of real things that he is really good at. And I really wish schools would change the way they look at kids with disabilities and say, okay, this is where you need help, but this is what you're really good at. And so we're going to work and
Yes.
focus on whether or not we can take that thing that you're really good at, that you really enjoy, and turn it into a job or turn it into something you can do in your life. And I hate that everything is so deficit focused.
Yes.
And
Preach.
so
Preach. Preach.
so I have hopes and dreams for his future because I see that he can do some awesome stuff. I mean, I can hand him a paintbrush and he likes to paint the inside of my husband's shed. He knows how to ride a bike. He likes to put things together, take things apart. He's very active. He's a very active boy, and he's very interested in the world, and he has a curiosity about everything. And I think he could work. I believe even now at his only be 11 years old that he can hold a job. I don't know what job that'll be, if that job would have to be created or if he'd have to work for something that we would have to create for him. But I really wish, and I'm hoping, hoping that if I advocate enough, that hopefully there will be a good program offered or made or created or dropped out of the sky for him to transition, because
Yes.
like Miss Shelby said, that there's definitely a lack of that. And there's such a focus on their deficits and what they can't do. That's the biggest issue, is people not seeing value in our kids. And he does have value. He's a human being and he's worthy of respect, and he can do things and he should be allowed to do things. And I want people to see the value in him. And so I'm hoping that with the right support, which is any kid in the right environment with the right support, I think he could do it. So I'm trying to get there with where he is, and it is a challenge. There's a lot of kids that have a lot of needs, and there's not enough teachers, and there's not enough support, and there's not enough money in the world to give all our kids everything they need. But I just know he can work, he can have meaning in his life, and I want that. And that's what my focus is, hopefully, as he gets older.
Well, I'm hearing a manual coming forth from this discussion, along with some other parents, because like, there's some, we had an author from Mountain Home come speak.
Mhm.
And he wrote a book and he was an actor. But that took a while, just like I'm going
Yes.
to segue from that into the fact that Jeremiah has a business,
Yes, he
you
does. He
know,
does.
and so here he is, 32, correct?
Mhm.
Today, happy birthday.
Yes. No, not today, just 32. Today he's
Oh,
32.
I'm sorry. I thought you said today was his
No, no, no,
birthday. I
not today. It's
misunderstood.
his birthday. I said it wrong.
Okay. Okay. No, I perceived it wrong. But anyway, so here we have a young adult. How long has Jeremiah had his business?
Probably 12 years or so now. We gave him the chance, I think it was right out of high school. So I would say he's been out of high school now for 11 years. So about 11 years, almost 12 years now, he's been doing his own thing. But, I think it's important to address that Arkansas Rehab and the services they provide, Arkansas Transition Services, that's all wonderful. But my particular son does not fit. He is a
Right.
square peg trying to get in a round hole. He
Mhm.
doesn't want to wash dishes. He doesn't want to sweep somebody's factory floor. He doesn't want to push the shopping carts. He doesn't want to work in horticulture. But we can find something that he can do. Let's find something that he's good at, that he enjoys, because the last thing I want to do is tell Jeremiah, this is your job. You're going to be hauling carts in the store, or you're going to be working as a dishwasher. Enjoy it until you retire, till you go. I don't want that for him. I want him to enjoy what he does. I want to enjoy what I do. And I want my other children to enjoy what they do for a living. I mean, how miserable would it be if we were assigned one task, do this one task until you die? I mean, I want him to love what he does. So he did start his own business. We saw it was just a God-given moment for us. He was kicked out of art class in public school for biting his teacher. And they sent him home with all of his supplies, and he came in with a little tiny ceramic turtle that he had made in class. I've got it right over here on my desk. But came up with this little turtle, and that just kind of started the ball rolling for him. He began working with clay, and we bought him 50 pounds of clay in a kiln for the backyard, and that's just kind of started him off. And it seemed kind of frivolous in the beginning. My husband was not really sure about spending all this money for this clay, and then him, is just going to give it all away. But people were buying it. They were buying it, and then so the wheels started turning. And then I realized that this is a profession for him. He can do this for a living. Now, he's not going to ever support himself in it, certainly, but it does give him something to do. It does give him an income. It gives him a money box of money to count at the end of the sale. It gives him Facebook presence. He can interact with people, so he's gaining social skills when he interacts with people and talks about how much money they're going to have to pay him for whatever he's making. So it does benefit him. It certainly does. He's very excited about it. He knows how to cash a check. When he receives a check in the mail, he opens that envelope, flips that check over, writes his signature and his account number on the back side of that check. He knows how to do those things. He's good at it. So yes, he does have his own business. I think that every person out there with a disability is capable of something similar to what Jeremiah is able to do now. I think they are capable. We just have to find what works for them.
And what's Jeremiah's business called? It's
called Shop Jeremiah 2911, and it's on Facebook only. I need to build him a website, but I'm hesitant to do that because he is very Facebook savvy and he has learned all the ins and outs. I'm afraid he would obsess about it if I did it. It would be a self-stimulating behavior for him to constantly post pictures, because he constantly posts pictures to his Facebook store now. And I'm worried that if I created a website, he would, number one, he would know how to use it for sure. And then he would add too much to it and it would blow up the internet or something. I don't know. Kim Kardashian does it all the time, right? So I figured your mom and I could probably do it too.
I don't know. I don't follow her.
Yeah, I heard that she did that once. She broke the internet. Jeremiah would break the internet if he were to get on there and start putting all his pictures on there. He would break the internet. So we can't have that. I can't be responsible for that.
Well, we've been on here for a little while. What advice, Shelby, would you give a parent? And I'm going to ask you the same thing, Michele. What advice would you give a parent as they're working with the school, with their communities, as some hope for their children or their teenager, young adult?
It's important that you learn your role. As a parent, learn your role. If I could communicate that to anyone, and you listen to me. There's my guy right there. He's getting ready to go somewhere.
Hi, Jeremiah.
If I could communicate that, learn your role, learn your responsibilities as your child's parent in that special education setting at school. Do that early on. I waited until he was in junior high to really get a good handle on what my expectations were and what my responsibilities were as his parent. So learn that role early. You can do it. You just have to spend a little bit of time studying the rules and regulations. You can do it. You have to recognize that you are a part of that team. It's not just what the school wants to do for your child, it's what you want for your child also. You are a part of that team, a part of that team that's going to make the decisions about your child. Recognize that those decisions cannot be made without you in the room, that you have to be a part of that. Start out strong as an advocate, and you will not fall backwards. You will not. If you start strong, you will not fail.
Okay, Michele.
She said it really, really great. A lot of the stuff that I would also say, start early, educating yourself on your rights, on your child's rights, develop an idea in your mind of your child, what they're good at, what they need help with, and focus on their future, and where you see them. That picture becomes, I think, clearer as your child gets older, kind of where you see them, and just stay focused on that goal, and that school is going to be a reflection of their life. And so it's so important to advocate in school, because what they learn in school and with their interventions is can make or break their future. And so just educate yourself and just build a support system, find people that support you and your family. That's been so helpful. I've had different people come in and out of our lives that have helped us through our journey, and feeling like people understand and that they see us, and that they, they're there for us, and they understand what we're going through, and they support us and our kids. And so that has really helped a lot of the journey, because somebody taught me, and so now I'm teaching others, and it just kind of shares around into this big, really large community out there. And that's how we really get things to change for our kids, is building that big community of people that'll join together to fight those big battles and things like that.
Yes, I think you're right, and it is so important to have that community connection, Michele. You're right. It is very important, and that was a struggle for us as a young family. That definitely was hard for us to do. And we had a good church set up who loved Jeremiah, who had him participate in children's worship and those kinds of things. And that was very beneficial. He has a good mindset of how that whole process of death works today. And so that's a good thing too. But it is about those connections that you make. And I do think that it is harder for us. The older we get, the more secluded I think we become. I do, but smart words from such a young mama.
Very good. I'm back.
There she is.
Typical internet in the country. Okay, there's a lot more I would love to talk about because of guardianship, no guardianship, power of attorney, able account, all those kind of things. But because of time, this has been extremely helpful. My one thing that I want to add to what you two said about the support was, as a parent, a mentor, we of course encourage the parents to bring their hopes, their dreams, their concerns. And I tell everybody in writing. And like I said in a meeting, I had one parent, when I said to them, what do you see your child doing in the future? And of course, it was like, I can't even see yesterday because I'm so overwhelmed. And so when the person took that time to write out their concerns, their hopes, their dreams, all of that, it was like a light bulb just opened up and said, the sky's the limit, because if we start early, we can build on that. Right. If we wait till they're 17 and we fail to look at the transition, and
Don't
we've
wait.
got, oh no, then we're in super duper speed mode.
Yes,
And so that's mine, is that input statement on the parent, on the
yes,
IEP, make sure it's a true parent input
yes.
statement.
I think so too. And it's okay to have those high, lofty goals. Make those lofty
Absolutely.
goals, reach as high as you can to get those things. Absolutely. I think that's very, very key. Don't just give up because we've got a diagnosis. Let's see how far we can take this thing. Let's just see how far we can go. And I think that is fine.
Well, we have a few more days left for both military child and autism.
Yep.
And I just want to do a little thing about next month. Arkansas Commissioner, the Arkansas Department of Education Commissioner has made May the month of the military spouse. So I don't want to be on the internet all the time, but I'm going to be interviewing military spouse. And of course, I am one. I'm a retiree, I guess you could say. But the experience is mine is old. I want to find some young, similar to Michele and Shelby, because we were during the Vietnam War was when we were involved in the service and retired after in 94, I believe it was, or 96. But anyway, so that's what we're going to do. And we're also going to highlight, of course, May is Mental Health Month, and it's foster care.
Yes.
And cystic fibrosis.
Yes,
so
we've got a lot.
I'm hoping, and that's my dream for next month, is that we bring awareness to several things.
Yes.
And we have more of these. But thanks, Shelby. Thanks, Michele, for taking your evening. I know we all had one of those wonderful days. I know I have.
Oh, it's been a dandy.
Yes.
I've only cried once.
Well, I love traveling. It's just been beautiful traveling up north. But anyway, thank you all. You guys have a great night, and we'll connect on Monday.
Thank you. Thanks, Loreena, for the opportunity to get to share.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right.
Bye.
Good night. Good night, Jeremiah. Good night, buddy.
You want to say good night?
Good night, everybody.
Okay.